Let us now talk about Access Risk Analysis module. SAP GRC comes with four modules: uh, Access Risk Analysis, Emergency Risk Access Management, Access Request Management, and Business Role Management. Each of these four modules have their own purposes in the GRC environment. Access Risk Analysis, which is the key application, key module in the GRC access control, is used to identify and manage risks in your systems. Okay, that is the key here. And we'll see how to configure it and how to use it. The second module, Emergency Access Management, is used in a critical situation when the users need additional access that is not part of their regular access. Okay, and because the access that they want may be conflicting with their job functions, and there was no mitigation or remediation for such access. Okay, so for those kinds of scenarios, situation, you use EAM. Access request management is basically to streamline and automate various activities such as creation, changing, deletion, locking kind of activities in user provisioning, in user management. Okay, and the fourth one is business role management, and this is basically a module that helps you streamline and efficiently manage your roles in your various systems. Okay, so this is GRC BRM can be used as a single point repository of the roles in all your SAP environments, meaning S/4HANA, ECC, BI, all the roles from all the systems could be managed within BRM repository. Now, amongst the four modules, ARA is the most critical one, and this is a module that everybody would, when they want to implement GRC, this is the module that everybody will implement. Okay, because the whole purpose of this module is to identify and manage risks in your environment. Okay, so if you look at this chart here, right, you have the primary components here, right, ARM, and how is it required, how is ARA important for ARM, okay, because risk analysis of requests for user access at the time of provisioning. So when in ARM, when you submit a user request, you can also perform risk analysis. See, so meaning if let's say your some 2 or 3 roles are you are trying to assign to a user, so the risk analysis configuration that you do will be used to run a risk analysis report and to check whether there are any SOD violations or conflicts, or if any critical access is getting assigned to the user or not. So that is where ARA is integrated, or ARA is used. The configuration of ARA is used in ARM. Similarly, ARA is again integrated. ARM is required for change management for approval of risks and mitigation. So in ARA, when you create a function or you create a risk, right? So the approval of those functions or risks can be done using the ARM MSMP functionality. Okay, so in that manner, ARA requires ARM. Okay, from an approval standpoint. Okay, when you create a function or risks or mitigations from info in ARA module, from that standpoint, ARA would need ARM for approvals. ARM MSMP workflows for approvals. Similarly, if you look at ARM and BRM, okay, so ARM needs BRM because when you're trying to submit a user request, okay, and when you specify the roles, okay, to be assigned, those roles need to be in the BRM repository. Okay, so that is how ARM and BRM are. You need ARM for ARM. You need BRM. Okay, they go hand in hand because of that. Now again, BRM to ARM, the combination is required because in BRM, when you are creating a role, okay, so you could have you would need to use MSMP workflows which are part of ARM for let's say if there are any risks, right? So if you want to get an approval for mitigating those risks, you need to use ARM workflow. Or even if when you create a role, want to create a role with or without risks, you may get you may want to get an approval from the role owner, identified role owner. So okay, even for that MSMP workflow will be used. So that is how BRM and ARM are connected. Now BRM and ARA, they are connected to each other because when you create a role, you can also run risk analysis report to check whether the transaction codes that you're adding to the role, whether they have a conflict within them or not. Okay, so that is how BRM and ARA are connected. Okay, now risk terminator and ARA. So, and this is actually part of BRM also, risk terminator, because when you try to add a transaction code, there are parameters that you need to configure also for this. So when you try to add a transaction code or assign a role to a user via PFCG or SU01 directly in the backend system, and then the risk analysis will be run. Because, but like I said, in order for to implement this feature, there are some parameters that you need to set up in the GRC system as well as the backend system. So risk terminator and ARA, they are connected, okay. Similarly, EAM, ARA. EAM and ARA checks for critical transaction codes as defined in the ARA rules. So in ARA, you can define a critical, what are the critical transaction codes, what are your critical roles or critical profiles. Okay, so when somebody uses the EAM module, this ARA, using the configuration in ARA for critical transaction codes, you can get the appropriate reports. ARM and EAM again are connected because when you submit a request for EAM, for using EAM, okay, for emergency access, you can use a workflow, MSMP workflow, to get the approval for those such requests. So if you look, in most cases, ARA is the most critical module because all the modules, okay, they use ARA functionality at some point or the other. Okay, so what makes up an ARA? What is an ARA configuration? Now, the key element of a ARA is the rule set. Okay, the rule set is your the heart. Okay, of I'm going to WBC. So the GRC rule set is the heart of the application uh, that impacts activities across all GRC modules. Okay, so we just saw what those, how those impact, how the activities get impacted with the ARA, how, other modules are connected with the ARA, okay? Now, so that is why, because it impacts the other modules and activities in other modules, like BRM, ARM, and EAM, it is essential that you have a effective, you do a effective customization of the rule sets. Okay, now the rule set itself is actually a, a collection of risks used for SOD or sensitive access reporting. Okay, so we'll see what those are. Okay, so basically it's a collection of access lists, rule sets. Okay, now so to have an effective, rule set, what you need to do is you need to try and eliminate okay, so effective customization of rule sets means accurate and meaningful reports, reducing costs of compliance and appropriately managing risks. Okay, that's number one. Number two, it helps lowering of SLAs of access requests to focus on right risks. Okay, so we are talking about why you should have a effective rule set. Why you need to customize rule sets effectively. And this rule set customization should help in the elimination of audit surprises, right, via proper use of mitigation controls. Okay, so that's the third thing that your rule set should help you with. That is the elimination of any surprises that may come out in the audit reports when the audit is coming. And it also should help you in reducing administrative costs as new users and roles are introduced in a compliant manner from the start. Okay, now let's click on the rule sets and see what it contains. Okay, so rule sets is basically a collection of risks. Okay, so when we go to the risks, we'll see what it is. Okay, so let's click on risks, rule sets, and then you'll see when you create, you just create a rule set and give a description. That's it, nothing else. Okay, at this point. So let's create, say, I'll say a rule set called ACE rules. Okay, and save. So data has been saved, so you can close. So this is how you create a big rule set. Okay, but right now my ACE rule set that I created doesn't contain anything. Okay, so what does a rule set contain? Okay, we'll see what are the different components needed to make up a rule set. Okay, now a rule set ultimately is made up of access risks. Okay, but access risks are made up of functions. So what are functions? Okay, a function is a grouping of one or more related actions. Let us click on functions, and to see. It's a grouping of, let's open one and understand what a function is. Okay, a function, okay, this doesn't have anything in it. Okay, let's go and pick something that has something. Let's pick something. Okay, let's take this. So what is a function? A function is a grouping of one or more related actions. Right? Actions meaning transaction codes. Okay, and or permissions. And or permissions. Okay. So anything, any transaction code and authorizations that are basically related to a same functionality, okay, you group them, club them into a function. Okay, so in this case you have MB01, MB0A, MyGo, and MyGo-GR, and some other transaction codes here listed, okay, which are, okay, 4 here in this case, but in this case you also have a Fiori app, okay, which is related to these transaction codes. Okay, so you club everything that is related to each other into one function, and also the authorizations for those actions, okay, those transaction codes. Okay, now every function, we'll talk about functions in a bit. Okay, so you have actions which are transaction codes within a function. You have a transaction code, and then you have permissions which are authorizations. Okay, now, so function, like I said, is a grouping of one or more related actions or permissions for a specific business area, okay, business process. Okay, so let's close this. And then, okay, so before we close, what is an action in that case, right? Now action, you know, is a transaction code. So what does a transaction code do? It's an activity that is performed in the system in order to fulfill a specific function. For example, you know, in this case, posting goods receipt for purchase orders. Okay, so that's a goods movements in another one. So these are the what do you call actions, or you know, or activities that you can perform to fulfill a specific function. Okay, so actions in GRC terminology is equivalent to transaction in normal SAP system. Okay, so that's one. The next one that you have here is permissions, right? Now, this is basically your authorizations that you require to perform the activity for the specific action, okay, to fulfill the function. Okay. Now, so permissions, these are the authorizations that allow user to perform a particular activity in the system. Okay, so what you see here is your authorization objects, right? And some of them could be active or some of them could be inactive, depending on how the system has been configured. And these objects actually come from these authorization permissions. They come from the SU24 settings in your backend system. So in this, whatever I have in this connector, right, this is my S4HANA system connector. So whatever is maintained in SU24 for MB01, that is why you get these authorization objects and authorization values. Okay, so this is tied up. What you see here is what you have in SU24 in the backend system. Okay, so now you have this system connectors, and this is basically an application connected to in GRC for purposes of risk analysis and user provisioning and using the firefighter IDs. So that is why we configured the connectors and connector groups. Okay, so they are used in EAM, ARM and ARA. Okay, so how does this rule set structure work, right? So before we come there, let's go and see what risk the next item in the list is, okay, in ERA. So you have access risk. Now we just saw what a function is, right? A function is a grouping of one or more what you call related actions or related transaction codes and or sometimes in permissions, authorizations for a business specific area. Okay, that's what a function is. Now, a risk is a grouping of one or more conflicting functions, okay, that presents an opportunity for physical loss or fraud, process disruption or productivity loss. Okay, what it means is, what I mean by that is, when a user gets access of transaction codes or actions from two different two conflicting functions, okay, it creates a risk. So risk is a combination of a collection of two or more conflicting functions. So for example, the risk ID B001 in this case, what you're seeing here, okay, is a combination of, is a risk B001 is a combination of BS11 and BS02. So if anybody who has access coming out of BS02 and access coming out of BS11, it could be one transaction code or two transaction codes or whatever. Even if it's a single transaction code that a user gets from one of these two functions, right, then the user will have this particular risk. Okay, so a risk is basically an activity that will, it's a collection of groups, collection of functions, and that causes risks in your system that can result in what do you call physical basically a fraud, okay, and sometimes it could disturb your processes also. So, and any activity, right, which basically causes some financial loss or a process disruption, okay, is a risk. And you have 5 types of risks. Okay, one is financial, in which case, if the financial risk, the risk impacts your financial reporting and accuracy and timeliness of your financial numbers. Okay, the second type of risk that you have is operational. Okay, now the risk, this is a type of risk which impacts your day-to-day business and productivity. The third one is your compliance, and this type of risks leads to non-compliance and procedural issues, ethical violations. Okay, so the compliance is the third, another one. So another risk that you have, if your system has a lot of risks and it's not well defined, your functions are not well defined, your risk IDs are not well defined, is also reputational. Okay, so the fourth risk that you have is reputational. So what does that mean? So risk of reputational nature impacts your company's reputation, the brand image, and that in turn will have a major impact on the company's existence itself. Okay, so reputation is very important for anybody. So especially, because of the reputation that the companies have in the market, it also generates business for them. Okay, and the fifth risk, the category of fifth type of risk is strategic. Okay, so these risks that you have, this type of risk basically impacts the business results, thereby causing deviation from the business plans that you may have. So trying to have a clean system, a risk-free system, though it's not possible, but 100% possible, but you need to make an attempt to keep your systems as clean as possible from risks. Okay, so let's close this now. What else do we have? So these are the four, these are the elements that make up your ERA. Now let us go and check what we have in functions. Okay, let's define a couple of functions and then we'll define a couple of risks and then try to run the risk analysis report.